Okay, welcome to the deep dive. You've given us quite a stack of sources here, all looking at recent crypto happenings, specifically around June 3rd, 2025.
That's right.
So our mission today, as always, is to really dig into these, pull out the key stuff, the surprising bits, and figure out what's actually going on.
Exactly. And the material, it covers a fair bit of ground. We've got institutional moves, some corporate strategy, regulations popping up, market analysis, even a little bit on AI, actually.
Right, quite a mix.
It's a snapshot, really, and we're going to try and break it down, make sense of it, and explain why it should matter to you.
Perfect. Let's jump right in then. One of the kind of headline items seems to be this transfer involving Grayscale. What did the sources say there?
Yeah, that one caught my eye, too. So Grayscale transferred 157 Bitcoin, specifically to Coinbase Prime.
Coinbase Prime. Okay.
And that platform, Coinbase Prime, it's often where the bigger players, institutions, tend to move assets. It could be, prepping for trades, maybe off-exchange stuff. It gets watched.
Right, right. A potential signal of larger moves. So
Yeah.
institutional wheels turning. But it wasn't just asset shifting. The sources also talked about companies actively buying Bitcoin. Yeah, like real corporate adoption.
Oh, absolutely. Confidence seems to be growing there. Metaplanet was a big one mentioned.
Metaplanet, yeah. What do they do?
They bought another pretty big chunk of 1,088 Bitcoin. Paid about $117.3 million for it.
Wow, over 1,000 BTC. And didn't that bring their total holdings to some kind of interesting number?
It did, yeah. The report said their total Bitcoin treasury is now 8,888 Bitcoin.
8,888. Huh.
Yeah, and that's worth, well, around $933 million based on the numbers given. They mentioned an average buy price, too, about $93,354 per coin.
Okay, so that average price gives you a sense of their cost basis, their strategy, a deliberate move.
Definitely looks like a long-term treasury strategy playing out. Significant stuff.
And it's not just like isolated incidents, right? The sources also pointed out this trend spreading geographically, something about Norway.
Correct. The Norwegian Block Exchange. They became the first publicly traded company in Norway to actually put Bitcoin on their balance sheet as a reserve asset.
The first one in Norway. Okay.
Yeah, just this idea of corporate treasury diversification into Bitcoin is, gaining ground in more places.
So we're seeing these big institutional signals, more companies buying in. But then there's always the other side, isn't there? Regulation. Australia popped up in the sources.
Uh-huh. Always part of the picture. Australia's Financial Intelligence Agency, ASTRAC, they've brought in new rules, specifically for crypto ATM operators.
ATM operators, what kind of rules?
Well, the main thing highlighted was transaction limits. They're putting caps on how much you can transact through these ATMs.
And the reason given for that?
The material explicitly linked it to tackling scams. They cited a rise in scams using ATMs. So these limits are a direct attempt to make it harder for criminals to move large sums quickly that way.
Makes sense. That push and pull, right? More adoption than regulators step in, often because of illicit use concerns. Okay, so away from the big picture stuff, there were also a couple of mentions about market analysis.
Yeah, briefly touched upon. One source mentioned Google Gemini, the AI, making a price prediction for Cardano, ADA, looking towards the end of June 2025.
AI predictions.
And another piece looked at Ethena, ENA.
Yeah.
Suggested there might be some upside potential based on a technical chart pattern they were seeing.
Interesting. And speaking of AI, there was that slightly different piece included about AI chatbots. Something about sycophancy.
Yeah, that was quite thought-provoking, actually. It was about the risk, as we use these AI tools more, even for financial info. The danger that they might just tell us what they think we want to hear.
Mirroring biases back at us.
Exactly. That sycophantic tendency. It's a good reminder about staying critical, even with sophisticated tools. A relevant point as AI intersects more with finance and info gathering.
It really does show how everything's getting interconnected. So looking back at everything you share, we've got Grayscale's institutional move, big corporate buys from Metaplanet, Norway's first public company adopter, then Australia tightening ATM rules citing scams, plus market predictions and this AI caution.
That's a good summary. And when you put it all together, you really see these simultaneous forces at play, don't you? You've got growing corporate and institutional confidence, strategic buys.
Yeah, big money moves.
But at the same time, governments are reacting, putting up guardrails, often driven by those real-world concerns like scams and financial crime.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. You see these companies making huge, confident bets on Bitcoin as a treasury asset, hundreds of millions. But then you see regulators clamping down on things like ATM limits specifically because of crime. So what is this constant push and pull, this sort of dance between corporate embrace and regulatory friction?
Hmm.
And what does that suggest to you about how widespread crypto integration might actually happen? How does that path forward look when you see these forces working together and sometimes against each other? Something to think about.